The Get Rich Slow Club podcast is a collaboration between Tash Etchman from Tash and Ana Christina from Perla. The Get Rich Slow Club acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. From coast to coast, across land, waters, and communities, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's appropriate for you.
Welcome to the Get Rich Slow Club podcast,
where we take you from beginner to confident investor,
where we can teach you everything you need to know about investing.
So come get rich slow with us.
Today we're going to cover all things dividends, including what they are, examples, pros and cons of dividend reinvestment plans, and franking credits. But first, what's your money moment of the week?
My money moment of the week is a very wholesome one. My child just lost their very first tooth, and I wasn't exactly sure how much the tooth fairy delivers. So I asked on social, and I got everything from, $1 to $5 to $10 for our first tooth.
$10? Wow.
Yeah, inflation. And many people mentioned inflation in that process. And ended up with a $2 gold coin, which was a great little learning opportunity because we got to talk about coins and money and cash and that kind of stuff. But really, my kid just wanted to play with the coin. So I don't know how much of money knowledge got disposed or got passed on to my kid, but nonetheless.
What did they do with the coin? Did they put it in a piggy bank or just roll it around?
Rolled it around, put it in a little box with other coins. Because I've been selling a lot of things on Facebook Marketplace, I have a cash jar that sits in our house. So my kid was like, I know you have coins in there. Can I have some of those coins? And I was like, well, sure. I'll just give you the other $5. So I was trying to explain how much money that was, but really it was about making little towers out of coins and playing with them. But, kids are small, and as long as they're exposed to that stuff, they'll pick it up as time comes. Not everything can be a learning opportunity, even if you want it to be.
Yeah, no, especially when they're so young as well and they don't understand the value of a coin yet.
Yeah, wait till we go to the store and they realize that they need many of those coins before they can buy that toy.
Anything. Yes.
Yeah. What about yours?
Mine was a fun one. I wanted to buy a new iPhone. I've been thinking about it for a few months now, but I've been waiting for the gift cards that I want to go on special at Coles because I want to earn velocity points. So I waited for there to be a 20 times bonus points on a promotional gift card at Coles. I had to go to 2 different Coles stores to buy enough gift cards because I spent like $2,000 on this phone. And then I went to JB Hi-Fi and used my 8 gift cards to buy the phone. But by doing that, I ended up getting 20,000 velocity points for a phone I was going to buy anyway. And that's worth like almost a flight from Perth to Canberra, which is huge. So it's an extra like $500 of value for me.
Wow. So let's just backtrack a bit for people who don't understand how points work and so forth. What were the things that you were looking for when you bought those gift cards?
So either you can buy gift cards at Coles that earn Flybuys points that then you can then turn into velocity points. Or if you go to Woolies, you can earn everyday rewards points, which turn into Qantas points. So first you've got to decide, do you want Qantas or velocity points, and then pick that shop. And then I waited for the gift cards to have a promotion with 20 times the bonus points. So instead of earning 1 point per dollar, I earned 20 points per dollar. But then you have to halve them going from Flybuys to velocity. So it was 40,000 Flybuys points for $2,000, and that was 20,000 velocity points.
Wow, that's awesome. What a way to hack your way through your new iPhone.
You can do it with so many different things. Like the gift card I got had like JB Hi-Fi, Officeworks, The Good Guys, there's heaps of clothing stores as well. Sometimes they have Airbnb, that's a good one. Uber as well, you can just put it on your account as Uber credit. I also recently got a discount on a Woolies gift card. So it was like 3% off. But I also use that with my 10% everyday rewards discount too. So you can kind of stack things as well sometimes. At the moment, it changes every week. They've got discounts or extra points on FPOS cards that you can literally use anywhere. So that's an awesome one as well.
I haven't done enough of this gift card hacking. I mean, like obviously I've used points in the past for my credit cards, for traveling and so forth, but this is just a new thing I need to pay a little bit more attention to.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you brought it to my attention because sometimes there's big purchases and you're just like, why wouldn't I just point hack it, right?
Yeah. And sometimes they've got 10% off gift cards as well. So you're automatically making a saving that way. But yeah, it's a little bit of admin and remembering what gift cards you've got and how much you've got on them, especially if you're not spending it all in one go. But I think for phones or new furniture or like appliances from the Good Guys, it's a really good idea.
So you usually know what you're going to purchase ahead of time and then you kind of wait for that gift card to go on sale for those points. Is that kind of how you do it? You don't like go and buy a bunch of these gift cards and then just figure out a way to spend them?
No, because then I feel like you're make excuses to buy things you don't need. So I definitely do it that way, where I want something, I wait for the promotion and then I buy it. But sometimes with like grocery store ones, I'll just buy like $500 ones of those because I know I will spend $500 on groceries in a month or two anyway. But things like JB Hi-Fi, you don't want to be forcing yourself to go and buy something random you don't need, or The Good Guys even, especially if something might be cheaper somewhere else. Like I see Luxury Escapes really often and I've bought those gift cards before, but often accommodation is cheaper on Agoda or Booking.com. So you don't want to be forced to use it on the more expensive option if you don't need to.
Makes a lot of sense. So let's jump into dividends. Woo, exciting. I love dividends. They're great. So what are dividends?
So when you invest in shares, you can receive an income payment, which is called a dividend or a distribution. We often refer to them as dividends, but we'll dive into the difference shortly.
Dividends are payments made by a corporation to its shareholders, usually in the form of cash or additional shares. They're essentially a way for companies to share their profits with investors, kind of like a thank you for investing with the company.
When a company makes a profit, it can either reinvest that money back into the business or distribute it to shareholders as dividends. For many investors, dividends are an attractive feature because they provide a steady stream of income. So how do shares and ETFs actually make money? We've heard of dividends, but is there something else?
So shares and ETFs are great because they're often two-dimensional assets, which means you can make money from both dividends and capital growth. I like to use the house analogy to explain this. Dividends are like the rent you'd receive from an investment property,
whereas the capital growth is the increase in value of investment over time. For shares, this can happen as the company grows and becomes more valuable and the share price increases. But for a house, capital growth can happen as the value of the property increases over time. Dividends are the regular income payments you receive while owning the investment, but with capital growth, you usually need to sell the house or share to get access to this money.
So let's talk a little bit about the difference between dividends and distributions, which we alluded to at the beginning of the show. So you might have heard the term distributions and wondered how it differs from dividends. While dividends are specific to companies, distributions can refer to payments made by other types of investment entities, such as managed funds, exchange-traded funds, ETFs, listed investment companies, LICs, and real estate investment trusts, so REITs.
Essentially, dividends are a type of distribution, but not all distributions are dividends, and the key difference lies in the source and the structure of payments. Although technically it's incorrect, often the two terms are used interchangeably. Like I often say I get dividends when technically I'm getting distributions from my ETFs.
Yeah, I also often use dividends in conversations, but essentially people use them interchangeably, even though it can be wrong. So here are some examples of high-paying dividend ETFs. It's important to remember to look at the overall return when comparing investments, including dividends, capital growth, and currency. So for example, YMAX is an ETF which has a 9% annual dividend growth over 5 years up to 29th of February 2024. Sounds huge, right? But this ETF overall actually had a negative growth. So the overall annual return was 7.7% over 5 years.
But another ETF called VHY had an annual dividend of only 5.5% over the 5 years, but overall it returned 10.5%, including the capital growth.
In the same time period, though, VESG returned 14.5% overall with only a 1.9% dividend growth. So while dividends are great, you need to consider how the total return of an investment compares.
There's a really great graphic made by Investing with Chris and Perla, so check out their Instagrams that shows these investments, but also a heap of other ETFs and compares their total growth, their capital growth, and their dividend returned as well. It's quite interesting.
I know we've talked quite a bit about this. People often talk about capital growth. Like they'll be like, how much did the share price go up? Like, what's it at now? But it's really important to look at also the dividends and the currency on that. And there are certain platforms that you can look into, such as ShareSite and Navexa, that dives deeper into this so you can have a holistic picture of actually where your investments are at.
Yeah, definitely. Because we see with Tesla, for example, they don't pay dividends, but Tesla's always in the media being like, look at their huge growth or their huge fall now. But if you're not considering dividends, it's really hard to compare. It's like the analogy of you can't compare apples with oranges, you have to compare apples with apples.
For sure. So how to find out which investments pay dividends? Now, you can basically Google the investment you're looking with dividend yield, and it should come up. If you're looking at an ETF, you could go to the fund manager website, for example, BetaShares or Vanguard, and scroll to the distribution section.
I personally have really been enjoying the layout on the InvestSmart website as it clearly shows the percentage of franking credits, which we'll get to a little bit later. As an example, I just Googled the Ethy dividend and clicked on the distribution info and then looked down for the section called yield information. This can be a bit confusing because you click on distribution and then there's not another heading saying that. It says yield information instead, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's got the 12-month distribution yield shown as a percentage, as well as the frequency. So for Ethy, it pays dividends semi-annually, which means twice a year.
A common question is how often are dividends paid? And the frequency can depend on the company. The most common schedule is quarterly, meaning dividends are paid 4 times a year. However, some companies pay dividends monthly, semi-annually, or annually. It's important to check the company's dividends payment schedule if you're relying on this income for regular expenses.
So now we know what dividends are. Now there's the big question of, do you want to reinvest your dividends or not? There's something called a dividend reinvestment plan, which automatically reinvests your dividends for you. But there are pros and cons to this. So some of the pros, it lets you buy new shares without paying any brokerage. And some companies may also offer a dividend reinvestment plan discount.
The other pro is convenience. So DRIPs are automatic, which means you don't have to manually reinvest your dividends. This can be especially beneficial for long-term investors who prefer a hands-off approach.
And reinvesting dividends through a dividend reinvestment plan can help with dollar cost averaging as you're buying shares at different prices over different times and potentially reducing the average cost of your investment.
So here are some of the cons when it comes to DRIP. There's tax considerations. So reinvested dividends are still considered income and are subject to tax. You must pay tax on the dividends received, even if you don't actually receive it in cash form.
This is a big myth I see pop up where some people think they don't have to pay tax on reinvested dividends, but you do have to. So if you are reinvesting a high number of dividends, for example, or a high amount, then you'll need to set aside quite a bit of income for tax. It also reduces your liquidity as well. So if you are relying on dividends for income, you won't be getting this if you're reinvesting them. So something to consider.
There's also concentration risk. So the idea is that if you're continuously reinvesting dividends into the same company, it can lead to being over-concentrated in a single share or increasing your exposure to a company specific risks. For example, if you keep reinvesting dividends from Rio Tinto, a downturn in the mining factor could significantly impact your overall portfolio value.
Or another good example of this is the tech bubble from, like 24 years ago now, where everyone had a lot of money in tech stocks and they did really well. So they would have kept reinvesting those dividends back into tech stocks if they did that. And then when the bubble finally crashed, they definitely felt it because they weren't diversified enough.
This is just something important to think about, especially if you have a share or an ETF that does actually pay quite a bit in dividends, and therefore you're constantly investing in it as opposed to other ones that don't.
When you're just starting out, it can take years for your dividends to build up to enough to buy one full unit of a share. For example, one share of VAS, which is a popular Australian ETF that we mentioned quite a bit, is just over $96. In April, VAS paid a dividend of just over 84 cents per share. That means you'd need 114 shares or just under $11,000 invested for those dividends to be reinvested for you. For compounding to work, your money needs to be invested and making more money, not just sitting in an account somewhere earning no interest for could potentially be years. This one surprised me because I wanted to reinvest my dividends for the ETF called IVV when I first started years ago, but that share ended up being like $500 per share, which is huge. And now they've split it so it's less. But yeah, my dividends for that ETF are kind of just sitting there waiting endlessly until they have enough.
Yeah, that is one of the challenges with a DRIP as well.
I've also read that you can't get your money back either. Like if you decide not to continue participating, the money will be donated to charity. So that's not great either.
Is that true?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I Googled it on the ASX website the other day because I've heard of it for some of it. I don't know if some let you have the money back, but on the ASX it says they will just donate the money for you if you decide not to participate, to your residual balance. That's what they call it.
Wow. Might be a really good reason to log into your share registry and just make sure that you're very much aware of where your DRIP is at the moment. The other con of using DRIP is that it can make admin quite hard when you do go and sell. So there's just additional considerations in regards to that.
Do you reinvest your dividends?
You know, I used to. Actually, I keep thinking what I'm doing. In Canada, I do because the system's a little bit different over there. Whereas here, I did at one time and then I did not. So now I receive everything in cash and then reinvest the way that I do. And that's because I do hold some shares that I no longer want to invest in. So I kind of have one or two ETFs that I regularly invest in, but I hold quite a bit of ETFs that I no longer want to invest in. So I just kind of sit there and Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, no, I've tried not to since that IVV investment years ago, but DHHF automatically turns it on for you, which I knew but kind of forgot about when I started buying it. So I need to go in and turn that one off. But I want to try and time it when they've paid it out and bought me another share with it first, so I don't just kind of lose the $10 that's sitting in there.
How interesting. It's automatically turned on.
Yes.
Clever.
It's a new thing, isn't it? Yeah, I've not seen that with other ones. I've just noticed it with that one so far, but definitely something to check.
Right. So another important thing when it comes to dividends and investing is franking credits. And franking credits took me a while to wrap my head around because this is not a thing in Canada. So franking credits are quite unique to Australia. They are tax credits that are attached to dividends paid by Australian companies. And these credits represent the tax the company has already paid on its profits before distributing them as dividends to shareholders.
So how this works is the company pays tax and then pays dividends to investors. Then the ATO receives tax from this company and keeps track of the credit for the investor. The investor then receives the dividends from the company and pays tax after the franking credit is applied.
So one thing to remember is that your marginal tax rate should be considered if you are focused on dividend investing strategy. So that's something that some investors invest in. They have a strategy where they want to receive a lot of dividend income, which is fantastic. But if you're in a high tax bracket, that might cost you quite a lot in tax. So just something to think about. So for example, the company tax rate is 30%. So that means a fully franked dividend would be at most a 30% tax credit. So if your personal tax rate is 30%, dividends are pretty much tax-free as you get a credit for the 30% tax that the company has already paid.
If the franking credits are more than your marginal tax rate, you can receive a refund for the difference. This is often the case for retirees who are earning a lower income. If your personal tax rate is 45%, you still need to pay 15% on the dividends after taking off the tax credit for the 30% tax paid. So while it's not completely tax-free, you do get a tax discount for that situation.
Yeah, that's the part that I had to wrap my head around. It is obviously beneficial for someone who's in a low tax bracket, so retirees for the most part, but less so if you're at your highest earning capacity and you have to pay quite a bit in tax.
Oh, it's still good though, because you're still getting a discount. Yeah,
it's true. It's just something to take into consideration, as all things are when it comes to investing.
It seems more attractive when you get money back rather than still having to pay some money.
Yeah, for sure.
There has been talks around this being removed. I think the government tried to take it away a few years ago. I can't remember exactly what happened and when, but just something to be mindful of if you're depending on something that is written into the Australian law or the government law, that things might change in the future. Because I know it was really hard for retirees who had planned and factored in the franking credits, and then it was taken away for a short period of time.
That's why, depending on your marginal tax rate, it's important to do some tax planning or talk to a tax advisor. Tash, when you invest, are dividends a part of your investing plan, or how do you think about them?
I used to focus more on capital growth because that's kind of what the people of Reddit say, and everything says that you should focus on capital growth more. But I do like getting the dividend payments and I like seeing them. And it is quite fun not having to sell the shares to get those payments. But I think it's a mixture of both, like those examples we used previously. Like if you just focus on dividends, you might be losing money in the capital growth. If you just focus on capital growth, you might not be receiving that income. But there are investments that pay both. So most of my ETFs usually pay a little bit of dividends anyway. What about you?
Yeah, I have never really focused on the dividend yield. And I know that is a strategy for some people, especially as they get closer to retirement. So maybe as I get older and older, it'll be something I'll want to consider more when it comes to my tax planning and how I want to live my life in the future. But for right now, it's so nice to see a little bit of money hit my bank account and know that that's purely from investing. It's kind of exciting. Do you do something special with your dividends, or do you just kind of do you mentally think about it as hey, I'm going to add this to something, or I'm going to spend it on XYZ? How do you think about your dividends?
Yeah, mostly sometimes I'm like, oh, that's cool because that's a solid amount of money. I could buy a smoothie, or I could pay off my car thing or whatever it is for that. But with mine, I'm pretty boring. I just add them to my next investment. So I usually just transfer them to Perla and they'll be added to my next auto invest amount, which is fun. But you can kind of think about it like you're reinvesting your dividends yourself. So even if you're not using a dividend reinvestment plan, you can just top up your next investment with them. What do you do?
Yeah, I do the same thing. In fact, actually, every time my dividends hit my bank account, or my distribution, I should say, because it's mainly ETFs, I just go and invest it with like $1,000, or I like top it up to $1,000 or whatever the amount is, and just be like, I'm just going to invest this straight away. Like this money's in and now it's gone along with some more money, which I mentioned to my partner while I was on parental leave and getting no income. Except for dividends. And he's like, well, how are you just randomly investing here and there? And it's like, it's part of my strategy. Yeah, it's part of my plan. Because that's what happens, right? Like often we have our habits and the way we think about money just kind of get incorporated into our day to day. And even though it's not advisable for me to be investing while I have no income coming in because we need the cash flow, that's just one of those things where it's like, oh, I've always done it, so I'm just going to continue doing it. Yeah, that's the habit.
It's good to make it a habit and to think of it not as you're spending money. I think once you kind of make that distinction, it's harder to spend it. You're like, no, this is my investment money. It's not mine. It's just going straight back in. Rather than if you start spending it, it's easy to just keep going.
Yeah. I also have this weird thing where I have a lot of investments in Canada, and those hit the broker that I have there and then get reinvested when I go and invest things. So I do have quite a bit of investments in the other part of the world, but I don't get that same like excitement because they don't hit my bank account. They just like land up in the broker account, like on the platform. And so I forget about those, but there's this amazing platform that I use there for anyone who's in Canada. It's called Passive, and they have a really great kind of setup where you can see how much money you're coming in, what dividends. So I can actually see what my dividends have been over the past 10 years, over the past year, over the past 6 months. And it's a really cool thing to be like, oh, even though small amounts might be a $5 here or, $6 there, over the long run, you've had thousands of dollars, which is super cool to see.
It really adds up. And then if you're in Australia, you can also just use ShareSat or Navexa that we've mentioned as well. Not as cool as that one seems, but it still shows you how much you've earned in dividends, which is awesome.
Yeah, I showed Tash before the show
so
about
cool.
how I thought the graph was good. Yeah. It's really helpful to visualize those things.
I have to suggest it to ShareSat and Navexa to add those to their tool.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. We'd love to hear from you and what you do with your dividends. Do you reinvest them? Do you spend them? Do you invest them? What do you do? Let us know on social. You can find us online or join our Facebook group, which is the Get Rich Slow Club.
Woo. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please rate us 5 stars, write a review, or share with a friend. If you're new to investing, make sure to listen to our first 10 episodes. Follow us at Get Rich Slow Club or Tash at Tash Invest or me at Ana Christina.
This show was brought to you by Natasha Etchman, who is an authorised representative 1299881 of Guideway Financial Services, AFSL 420367, and Perla, who is an authorised representative 1281540 of Sanlam Private Wealth, AFSL 337927. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing. So make sure you check out our financial services guides and read the product disclosure statement and target market determination for any investments you're considering. See our show notes for more info.